Part 1. The Forgotten Empire, Elam. 3,000 years before the Persian Empire, 2,000 years before the pyramids. While the British Isles were still covered in forest, and Rome was just a shepherd's village, a civilization rose in the southwest of Iran. They called themselves Elam. History forgot them. The first secret of Iran lies in the city of Susa. Today it is a dusty archaeological site, but 5,000 years ago it was the capital of a kingdom that traded with India, fought Babylon, and built ziggurats that rivaled anything in Mesopotamia. The Elamites spoke a language unlike any other. It is not Semitic like Hebrew or Arabic. It is not Indo-European like Persian or English. It is a ghost language, isolated, alone. After a century of study, scholars can read it but barely understand it. The Elamites looked at the world and described it in ways we cannot follow. In 1901, French archaeologists digging at Susa found a monument that would change history. The Code of Hammurabi. The Babylonian king's laws had been carved on a 7-foot stone and brought to Susa as war booty 3,000 years ago. The Elamites took the greatest legal document of the ancient world and kept it. They did not destroy it, they preserved it. This was the Elamite way, not erasing cultures, absorbing them. The Bible mentions Elam. In Genesis, it is listed among the sons of Shem. The prophet Daniel, according to local tradition, is buried in Susa. Jews, Christians, and Muslims have pilgrimaged there for centuries. A Jewish prophet resting in the soil of pre-Persian Iran. Another thread in the endless tapestry. Elam's greatest mystery is its end. They did not vanish in fire and conquest. They simply faded. When the Persians came from the north, the Elamites did not fight to the death. They taught the Persians to write. They gave them their script. They became Persian while remaining themselves. The first example of Iran's strange magic. The conqueror is conquered by culture. The French archaeologist who excavated Susa, Jacques de Morgan, wrote in his diary in 1905, "I expected to find ruins. I found a civilization so sophisticated, so ancient, that it makes Egypt seem modern. These people built cities when Europe was still in the Stone Age. And no one remembers their names. No one except the Iranians. In Iranian collective memory, Elam is not forgotten. It is the root, the deep earth from which the Persian flower grew. When the last Shah of Iran celebrated 2,500 years of Persian monarchy at Persepolis in 1971, he stood on ground first made sacred by Elamite priests 2,000 years before Cyrus. The Elamites left no great libraries, no famous kings, no epic poems, but they left something more important. They left the idea that this land, this corner of the world between the desert and the mountains, was special, worthy of building, worthy of defending, worthy of remembering. When the Persians arrived, they found a civilization already ancient, already wise, already waiting for them. Elam is the seed. Everything else is the tree. Part 2. The King of Kings, Cyrus the Great. In 559 BC, a young man inherited a small kingdom in the mountains of southern Iran. His name was Cyrus. His kingdom was insignificant. His neighbors were mighty. Within 20 years, he would rule the largest empire the world had ever seen. How did he do it? Not with terror, with justice. When Cyrus conquered Media, he did not execute the Median king. He married his daughter and kept him as an advisor. When he conquered Lydia, he spared King Croesus and listened to his wisdom. Cyrus collected kings the way others collected gold. But Babylon was the prize, the great city, the center of the world. Its walls were 90 feet thick. Its gates were bronze. It had never fallen in 1,000 years. In 539 BC, Cyrus marched east. The Babylonian army met him at Opis. They broke. Cyrus entered Babylon not as a conqueror, but as a liberator. The Babylonians hated their own king, Nabonidus. He had neglected their gods. Cyrus did something unprecedented. He walked to the temple of Marduk, the Babylonian god, and prayed. He ordered his soldiers not to loot, not to destroy. He told the people, "Your God is my God. Your ways are my ways." He wrote it down on a clay cylinder. Today, that cylinder sits in the British Museum. Scholars call it the first declaration of human rights. "I am Cyrus, king of the world. I returned the images of the gods to their shrines. I let all people return to their homelands. I rebuilt what was broken." The Bible tells the rest. The Jews had been captive in Babylon for 50 years. Cyrus issued a decree: "Go home. Rebuild your temple. Practice your faith." The book of Isaiah calls him God's anointed, a pagan king called Messiah by a prophet of Israel, only in Persia. Imagine the scene. Jerusalem, 538 BC. A column of exiles walks through the ruins of Solomon's temple. They carry gold, they carry silver, they carry the sacred vessels stolen by Nebuchadnezzar. All returned. All because a Persian king believed that conquered peoples should worship their own gods in their own way. This was the Persian paradox. They built the biggest empire in history by convincing people that empire was good for them. Not through fear, through respect. Cyrus ruled for 30 years. He died fighting on the eastern frontier, probably in his 70s. His tomb still stands at Pasargadae, a simple stone chamber on a stepped platform. No gold, no jewels, just a quiet grave in the plain. Alexander the Great visited it 200 years later. He ordered it restored. Even the man who burned Persepolis bowed before Cyrus. The inscription on the tomb read, "O man, whoever you are and wherever you come from, for I know you will come. I am Cyrus, who founded the Persian Empire. Do not grudge me this little earth that covers my body." In 1971, the last Shah of Iran stood at that tomb and declared himself heir to Cyrus. It was propaganda, but it touched something real. Every Iranian knows the name. Every Iranian knows the story. The king who ruled the world and asked only for a handful of dust. Why does the West ignore him? Because his story complicates the narrative. Greece and Rome are the roots of Western civilization. But Cyrus was greater than any Greek, more just than any Roman, and he was Asian. In the ruins of Pasargadae, the wind blows through empty stone, but the idea remains. An empire built on tolerance is possible. A king can be both conqueror and liberator. The world once worked that way. For a brief moment, under a single man, it did. Part 3. Persepolis, the burned dream. January 330 BC. The plain of Mavdasht, southern Iran. For 50 years, the greatest empire in history had been building a city. Not a capital for administration, not a fortress for war. A stage, a symbol. A place where once a year the whole world came to celebrate. They called it Parsa. The Greeks called it Persepolis, the city of Persians. Darius the Great began it. His son Xerxes continued it. King after king added palaces, staircases, reliefs. They carved into stone the image of their empire. Endless processions of delegates from every nation bringing gifts. Bactrians with camels, Ethiopians with ivory, Indians with gold, Greeks with cloth. All walking up the great staircase, hands clasped in respect, bringing tribute to the King of Kings. There are no scenes of war on the walls of Persepolis, no prisoners being tortured, no enemies crushed under horses. Just peace, just unity. just the dream that the whole world could live together under one roof. The roof was cedar from Lebanon. The columns were 80 feet high. The halls could hold 10,000 guests. On the spring equinox, Nowruz, the Persian New Year, the king received them all. He sat on his throne and watched the nations bow, and for one moment the world was one. It lasted 200 years. On a spring night in 330 BC, a young man from Macedon walked into Persepolis. His name was Alexander. He was 25 years old. He had already conquered everything between Greece and Iran. He stood in the palace of Xerxes and looked at the art of his enemy. What happened next is a question that has haunted history for 2,000 years. The official story: Alexander got drunk. A courtesan named Thais suggested burning the place, revenge for Xerxes burning Athens 150 years before. Alexander threw the first torch. His soldiers joined in. By morning, Persepolis was ash. But the Persians tell a different story. They say Alexander knew exactly what he was doing. He didn't burn the city by accident. He burned it deliberately. Because Persepolis was a problem. It was proof that Persia was civilized, that Persia was great, that Persia had built something Athens could never match. Alexander needed to destroy that proof. He needed to erase the symbol so he could replace it with his own. The fire burned for days. The cedar beams collapsed. The stone columns cracked and fell. The gold melted. The reliefs, carved by the finest artists in the world, were scarred by smoke and heat. Some can still see the scorch marks today. When the fire died, the city was dead. Alexander moved on. He never rebuilt it. He never even visited the ruins. He left Persepolis to the desert. But Alexander could not erase what Persepolis meant. He himself fell in love with Persia. He married a Persian woman, Roxana. He adopted Persian dress, Persian customs, Persian court rituals. His own generals plotted against him because they thought he had become too Persian. He died in Babylon, dreaming of a mixed world where Greeks and Persians would rule together. Persepolis lay in ruins, but the idea of Persia survived. It survived in the memory of the people. It survived in the stories told around fires. It survived in the DNA of every Iranian who, even today, feels a shiver when they walk among those broken columns. In the 1930s, archaeologists found a clay tablet in the ruins. It was a payment record, a worker's wage, written in Elamite from the time of Darius, the same language as the forgotten people before the Persians. The thread of continuity unbroken. The worker's name is lost, but his tablet survived the fire. It survived the centuries. It survived Alexander. It sits today in a museum, a small piece of clay, holding the memory of a man who built a dream. The columns of Persepolis still stand, broken, burned, but standing. They face the sunrise as they always have, waiting for the world to remember. Part 4. The Parthians, Forgotten Knights. After Alexander came the chaos. His generals carved up the empire. For 100 years, Iran was ruled by Greeks who could not speak Persian, who did not understand the land they governed. The people waited. In the east, in a region called Parthia, a nomadic tribe saw their chance. They rode out of the steppes on horses bred for speed and endurance. They carried bows that could pierce armor at 200 yards. They called themselves the Parthians. Rome would learn their name the hard way. The year was 53 BC. A Roman general named Crassus was the richest man in Rome. He had crushed slave revolts. He had amassed unimaginable wealth. But he wanted more. He wanted what Alexander had. He wanted the East. Crassus marched east with 40,000 legionaries, the finest infantry in the world, disciplined, armored, invincible. They marched into the desert near a town called Carrhae, and they waited for the enemy to run. The Parthians came on horseback, not in a mass charge, in formation. Cataphracts, riders and horses covered in scale armor, carrying 12-foot lances, formed the center. Horse archers, riding the famous Parthian horses, swarmed the flanks. The Romans formed their testudo, the tortoise, shields locked, spears forward, invincible. The Parthians circled. They did not charge. They shot. Thousands of arrows rained down. The Roman shields held. The Parthians shot more. The arrows kept coming. The Parthian bow, a composite weapon of wood, horn and sinew, could outrange any Roman weapon. And the Parthians had brought camels loaded with arrows. They could shoot all day. The Romans waited for the arrows to stop. They did not stop. When the Romans tried to advance, the Parthians retreated, shooting backward over their horses' rumps. The famous Parthian shot, a death sentence disguised as retreat. When the Romans tried to retreat, the cataphracts charged and speared them like fish. At sunset, Crassus was dead. His head was on its way to the Parthian king. 20,000 Romans lay dead on the desert sand. 10,000 were prisoners. The Parthians lost almost nothing. Rome never forgot Carrhae. For 3 centuries, the Parthians were the only power that could stand against the empire. They fought Rome to a standstill. They captured Roman eagles, the sacred standards of the legions. They sent Roman emperors begging for peace. But the Parthians left few monuments, no Persepolis, no great inscriptions. They were a decentralized people, ruled by feudal lords who owed loyalty to a king of kings. They built no great cities because their power was in the saddle, not in stone. Western historians called them barbarians. But the Parthians were more than warriors. They sheltered Jewish scholars. They preserved Greek learning when Rome burned libraries. They built the Silk Road, connecting China to the Mediterranean, making Iran the crossroads of the world. In the ruins of the Parthian capital, Nisa, archaeologists found ivory rhytons, drinking horns carved with Greek gods. They found Hellenistic statues. They found Parthian coins showing Greek inscriptions on one side and Persian fire altars on the other. They were not barbarians. They were the bridge. The Parthians ruled Iran for nearly 500 years, longer than any dynasty before or since. They were finally overthrown by a Persian revival from the south, but their legacy endured. The idea that Iran could resist the West, could defeat the West, could remain itself while the empires of Europe rose and fell. Rome is dust. The Parthians ride eternal. Part 5. The Sassanids, the Fire Revival. The Parthians ruled for 5 centuries, but they were never truly Persian. They spoke Greek at court. They tolerated 100 cults and creeds. The old ways, the ways of Cyrus and Darius, had faded into memory. In 224 AD, a Persian prince from the south raised an army. His name was Ardashir. His grandfather was a priest of the fire temple at Istaka, near the ruins of Persepolis. Ardashir believed that Persia had lost its way. He believed the gods demanded a return. He marched against the last Parthian king. The battle lasted 3 days. When it ended, Ardashir stood alone. He crowned himself king of kings, and he announced to the world, "The Sassanids have come." The Sassanids were different. They were zealots. They declared Zoroastrianism the one true faith. They built fire temples across the empire. They carved inscriptions into mountains, proclaiming that their power came from Ahura Mazda, the wise lord. They looked back at the Achaemenids, the dynasty of Cyrus, and said, "We are their heirs." The gap of 5 centuries meant nothing. The fire had never died. Shapur I, Ardashir's son, was even greater. He pushed Rome to its knees. In 260 AD, he did what no Persian king had done since Darius. He captured a Roman emperor. Valerian came to Shapur in chains, wearing purple, begging for mercy. Shapur used him as a footstool to mount his horse. Roman sources refuse to mention this humiliation. Persian rock reliefs celebrate it with glee. The Sassanids built cities. They built dams and bridges. They built the first covered bazaars. They traded with China, with India, with Ethiopia. Their silver plates and silk textiles spread across 3 continents. A Sassanid crown prince could speak Greek, Persian, and Sanskrit. A Sassanid queen could read the Zoroastrian scriptures and the Indian epics. But the fire was not just in temples. It was in law, in government, in every aspect of life. The Zoroastrian priesthood, the Mobards, became the most powerful force in the empire. They decided who could pray and how. They persecuted Christians and Jews. They tried to burn out every faith but their own. Takht-e was the most powerful of these priests. He rose from obscurity to become the power behind 7 kings. His inscriptions on the Kaaba of Zoroaster list his achievements. I made the Zoroastrian faith great. I struck down the heretics. I destroyed the idols of the demons. When he died, the empire was more Zoroastrian than ever before. But purity came at a cost. The Sassanids made enemies. Rome, now Christian, hated them for persecuting Christians. The tribes of Arabia hated them for meddling in their affairs. The nobles hated them for taking their power. By the 6th century, the empire was exhausted. It had fought Rome for 400 years. It had won and won again. But every victory cost men and gold that could not be replaced. The last great Sassanid king, Khosrow II, overreached. He conquered Jerusalem. He took the true cross as a trophy. He reached the walls of Constantinople. Then Heraclius, the Byzantine emperor, struck back. He marched into the heart of Persia. He destroyed the fire temples. He burned the palaces. Khosrow was overthrown and executed by his own son. The empire was bankrupt. The armies were shattered. The nobles were fighting each other. And in the south, beyond the desert, a new force was gathering. An army of camel riders, inspired by a new faith, ready to conquer the world. They called themselves Muslims. They came for Persia in 637 AD. The Battle of Qadisiyah lasted 3 days. The Persians brought elephants, the Arabs brought faith. When the dust cleared, the last Sassanid king was running east, begging for help from the Chinese. He never found it. He died in a miller's hut, murdered for a few coins. The empire had fallen. But the fire did not go out. Part 6. Yazd, the city of wind towers. The Arabs came with swords and a new book. They conquered Persia in 3 years. The last Sassanid king ran east and died in a ditch. The empire that had ruled the world for 1,000 years was gone. But Persia did not die. It went underground. In the center of Iran, where the desert meets the mountains, there is a city built of mud, Yazd. For 1,000 years it has stood on the edge of nothing. The sand wants to swallow it. The heat wants to kill it. But Yazd survives. The secret is in the towers, bajirs, wind catchers. They rise from every rooftop like fingers reaching for the sky. They catch the slightest breeze and funnel it down into the houses below. In summer, when the desert hits 50 degrees, the houses of Yazd stay cool. The Persians learn to live with the heat instead of fighting it. Beneath the city, there is another world, qanats, underground canals stretching for miles. Built 2,000 years ago, dug by hand, maintained by generations. They bring water from the mountains to the desert. Without them, Yazd would be dust. With them, it blooms. After the Arab conquest, Yazd became something else, a refuge, a hiding place. The Zoroastrians, the followers of the old faith, fled here. They could not fight the new rulers. They could not convert. So they ran to the edge of the world and hoped to be forgotten. For a time, they were forgotten. The Arabs had little interest in this dusty corner. The Zoroastrians built their fire temples in caves and basements. They performed their rituals in secret. They passed their scriptures from parent to child, memorized, never written down, because written things could be burned. In the 9th century, a Zoroastrian priest named Manushya wrote a letter to his community. It survives. In it, he begs them not to lose hope. Do not think that because we are few, because we are weak, because we hide in the desert, that the gods have abandoned us. The gods wait. They have always waited. They will wait longer. The wait lasted 1,000 years. In Yazd today, there is a place called the Temple of the Fire. Behind a glass case, in a bronze vessel, a flame burns. It has burned for 1,500 years. It was lit before the Arab conquest, before the rise of Islam, before Muhammad was born. It was carried from fire temple to fire temple, hidden in caves, smuggled through mountains, kept alive by priests who risked death every time they fed it. The tourists come to see it. They take pictures. They move on. They do not understand what they have seen. A flame that watched empires rise and fall. A flame that refused to die. In the outskirts of Yazd, there are 2 towers on opposite hills. The Towers of Silence. Here, the Zoroastrians brought their dead. They laid them on stone slabs and left them for the vultures. The flesh was consumed. The bones were bleached by the sun. Then they were collected and placed in a central well. Earth and fire are sacred to Zoroastrians. They cannot be polluted by corpses. So the dead must go to the sky. For 1,000 years the vultures came. For 1,000 years the bones piled up. Then, in the 20th century, the vultures disappeared. Pesticides killed them. The Zoroastrians had to change. Now they bury their dead in concrete graves, sealed from the earth. The old ways die slowly. In the bazaar of Yazd, you can buy sweet halva, woven cloth, silver rings with the Faravahar symbol. The Zoroastrians sell them. They speak Persian with a slight accent. They look like everyone else. But they are different. They carry the memory of a time before Islam. They carry the fire. The mullahs of Iran have a complicated relationship with them. Officially, they are protected, a minority faith tolerated by the constitution. But unofficially, they face pressure. Their children are teased in school. Their businesses struggle. Their young people leave for Tehran, for Los Angeles, for anywhere the past weighs less heavily. In 2003, an earthquake destroyed the ancient city of Bam. Thousands died. The world sent aid. The Zoroastrians of Yazd sent food and blankets. They did not wait for permission. They did not ask if the victims were Muslim or Zoroastrian. They just helped. When asked why, an old priest said, "The fire does not ask who it warms, it just burns." That is Yazd, a city of wind and fire, a city that should not exist, a city that exists anyway. In the narrow alleys, the mud walls glow gold at sunset. The wind towers cast long shadows. The call to prayer echoes from the minarets. And in a quiet temple on a quiet street, a 1,500-year-old flame burns on, waiting, like it always has. In the city of Yazd, in the middle of the desert, the priests took the sacred flame from the last temple. They hid it in a cave. They kept it burning. For 1,000 years, through Mongol invasions, through Islamic rule, through everything, that flame never died. It still burns today. In a modern temple in Yazd, behind glass, a fire that was lit before the Prophet Muhammad was born. A fire that watched the Sassanids rise and fall. A fire that waited. The Arabs conquered Persia, but they could not kill the fire. And one day, the fire would rise again. Part 7. The Mongols, Shock and Absorption. In 1219, a messenger arrived at the court of the Khwarezmian Empire, which ruled Persia. He came from the east, from a man named Genghis Khan. He brought gifts and a proposal: peace and trade between two great powers. The Khwarezmian governor murdered the messenger. He sent the gifts back stained with blood. Genghis Khan looked at the sky for 3 days. He prayed to his god. Then he turned his army west. The world was about to change. The Mongols came like nothing Persia had ever seen. They did not fight like Persians. They did not fight like Arabs or Turks. They fought like the steppe itself, mobile, merciless, endless. Their horses could live on grass and snow. Their riders could shoot arrows with perfect accuracy at full gallop. Their armies moved faster than rumour. City after city fell. Bukhara, Samarkand, Nishapur, Herat. Each surrender was met with the same choice: submit or die. Those who submitted paid tribute and lived. Those who resisted were erased. The city of Merv was one of the great centres of learning in the Islamic world. Libraries, observatories, scholars from every land. When the Mongols came, the city resisted. For 2 weeks they held out. When they finally surrendered, the Mongols ordered everyone onto the plain outside the walls. For days the killing continued. The historian Juvayni, writing 20 years later, estimated the dead at more than 1 million. He may have exaggerated, but even a fraction of that number is unimaginable. Merv never recovered. It is still a ruin. The Mongols did not just kill people, they killed the land. They destroyed the Khanats, the underground canals that had watered Persia for millennia. They burned crops. They scattered books into rivers. They left entire regions uninhabitable for generations. Some scholars estimate that Persia's population did not recover to pre-Mongol levels until the 20th century. But then something strange happened. The Mongols stayed. Hulagu, Genghis's grandson, conquered Baghdad in 1258. He killed the last Abbasid caliph. He ended the Arab caliphate that had ruled the Muslim world for 500 years. But he did not return to Mongolia. He settled in Persia. He became Persian. His descendants, the Ilkhanids, built cities. They patronized Persian poets. They commissioned Persian historians to write their history in Persian. They converted to Islam. They married Persian women. They became exactly what they had come to destroy. The great vizier Rashid al-Din was a Jewish convert to Islam who served the Mongol court. He wrote a history of the world, the Jami al-Tawarikh, that included Persian, Chinese, Mongol, and European sources. Under Mongol rule, Persia became more connected to the world than ever before. The Silk Road flourished, ideas flowed freely. Ghazan Khan, who ruled from 1295 to 1304, was a devout Muslim. He built mosques and madrasas. He repaired the Khanats. He tried to restore what his grandfathers had destroyed. When he died, the people wept. The destroyer's grandson was mourned as a savior. This is the secret of Persia. It absorbs invaders. It digests them. It turns them into Persians. The Mongols came to destroy. They stayed to build. They came as wolves. They died as shepherds. And Persia, wounded, bleeding, reduced to ashes, survived. Again. In Shiraz, the poet Sa'di wrote during the Mongol invasions. His books were burned. His friends were killed. He wandered from city to city, begging for bread. And yet he wrote, "The children of Adam are limbs of one body. When one limb suffers, the others cannot rest." A Persian poet, homeless, starving, watching his world collapse, still believed in unity, still believed in humanity, still wrote words that would be read 700 years later. The Mongols are gone. Their empire crumbled. But Persia remains. The language remains. The poetry remains. The idea remains. In the ruins of Merv, the wind blows through empty streets. The libraries are dust. The scholars are bones. But in every Persian city, children still memorize the poems of Sa'di, still learn that all humanity is one body. The Mongols could not kill that. No one can. Part 8. Isfahan, half the world. In 1587, a boy of 16 inherited a broken kingdom. The Ottomans had taken the west. The Uzbeks were raiding from the east. The Portuguese controlled the Persian Gulf. The great empire of the Safavids, once proud, was crumbling. His name was Abbas. History would call him Abbas the Great. He made a deal with the devil. He signed a humiliating peace with the Ottomans, giving away land he could not defend. He moved his capital from Kazvin, too close to the Ottoman border, to the center of Persia, to a city with water and gardens and ancient memory. He chose Isfahan. When Abbas arrived, Isfahan was a provincial town. When he finished, it was half the world. The plan was audacious. In the center of the city, he built a square. Not just any square, the Naksh-e-Jahan, the image of the world. It was 500 meters long, 160 meters wide. Big enough for polo matches, big enough for armies to parade, big enough for the king to watch his entire kingdom pass before him. Around the square, he built monuments. The Shah Mosque, its dome so perfectly proportioned that it seems to float. The Sheikh Lotfollah Mosque, a private chapel for the royal women, its tiles changing colour from cream to pink as the sun moves. The Ali Kapu Palace, with its music room carved like a honeycomb, where the king watched polo games from his balcony. The Grand Bazaar, roofed and vaulted, stretching for kilometres. He brought merchants from India, craftsmen from China, artists from Europe. He told them, "Build me something the world has never seen." They did. The Shah Mosque has an acoustic trick. Stand under the center of the dome and clap. The sound echoes 17 times. The architects designed it without computers, without measuring tools, just with mathematics passed from father to son for 1,000 years. The Sheikh Lotfollah Mosque has no minarets, no courtyard. It was not built for crowds. It was built for one woman to pray in private. The light enters through windows in the dome and falls on the mirad like sunlight through leaves. The tiles are cream, not blue. They shift colour as the day passes. By sunset, they glow like fire. Abbas was a Shia Muslim. He made Shia Islam the state religion. He brought clerics from Lebanon and Bahrain to teach the people. He built seminaries. He sponsored processions in memory of Hussein, the martyred imam. He created a religious identity that separated Persia from the Ottoman Sunnis forever. But Abbas was also practical. He knew that Persia needed more than faith. It needed trade. It needed allies. In 1604, he did something unprecedented. He moved an entire population. Tens of thousands of Armenians, Christian merchants from the town of Julfa, were marched across the mountains to Isfahan. They were given land on the south bank of the river. They were allowed to build their own churches. They were allowed to govern themselves. The Armenians were the best merchants in the Middle East. Abbas knew that if he wanted Isfahan to be half the world, he needed them. So he brought them, forced them, and gave them freedom. In New Julfa, the Armenian quarter, they built churches with domes like mosques and bells like Europe. The most beautiful is Vank. Inside, the walls are covered in paintings, biblical scenes, the Last Judgment, heaven and hell. And on the dome, Islamic-style arabesques framing Christian angels. Two faiths, two worlds, woven together in tile and gold. Abbas sat in his palace and watched the merchants come. Indian textiles, Chinese porcelain, European glass, Persian silk, all flowing through Isfahan, all paying taxes, all making him rich. When foreign ambassadors came, he received them in the Chehel Sotun, the palace of 40 columns. The name is a trick. There are only 20 columns. But they are reflected in the pool before the palace, making 40. Persian humor, Persian subtlety, Persian magic. He showed them the murals inside, battles, receptions. A Safavid king wrestling a Mughal emperor. A Safavid king dancing with a European princess. The Persians always winning. The Persians always elegant. Abbas died in 1629. He was 71. He had ruled for 42 years. He had taken a broken country and made it the envy of the world. After him, the Safavids declined. The last kings were weak. The mullahs grew powerful. The Afghans invaded. The empire fell again. But Isfahan remained. Today, the square is a UNESCO site. Tourists take photos. Locals picnic on the grass. The domes still float. The light still shifts. The bridges still arch over the Zayande Rud, though the river often runs dry. In the bazaar, you can buy miniatures and carpets and silver. You can drink tea in a traditional tea house, surrounded by paintings of Ferdowsi and Hafez. You can hear the call to prayer echo across the square, just as it did 400 years ago. Half the world is gone. The Mughals are gone. The Ottomans are gone. The Portuguese left long ago. But Isfahan remains, a city built of mud and tile and dreams, waiting for the world to come back. Part 9. The Qajars and the Secret Revolution. The 19th century began badly for Iran. The Safavids were long gone. The Afghans had come and gone. Nader Shah, the last great conqueror, had died in 1747, stabbed by his own generals in his sleep. For decades, chaos reigned. Then came the Qajars, a Turkic tribe from the north. They reunified Iran slowly, painfully. In 1786, Aga Muhammad Khan chose a small village north of Tehran as his capital. It had good water. It was close to the Caspian. It was safe from Ottoman attack. He named it Tehran. The Qajars were not great builders like the Safavids. They were not conquerors like Nader. They were survivors. They inherited a country that was poor, isolated, and stuck between two expanding empires, Russia to the north, Britain to the east. The 19th century was the century of humiliation. In 1804, Russia attacked. The war lasted 9 years. Iran lost Georgia, lost Armenia, lost everything north of the Aras River. The Treaty of Golestan in 1813 was the first of many betrayals. Iran signed because it had no choice. Russia had cannons. Iran had courage. Courage was not enough. In 1826, Iran tried again. Another war with Russia. Another defeat. The Treaty of Turkmenchay in 1828 took more land. More humiliation. More proof that the old ways could not stop the new weapons. A young crown prince, Abbas Mirza, understood before anyone else. He sent students to Europe to learn the new sciences. He bought British cannons. He hired French officers to train his army. But he died young, and his reforms died with him. Then came the British. In 1856, Iran tried to take Herat, a Persian-speaking city that had been part of the empire for centuries. Britain declared war. A British fleet sailed into the Persian Gulf. British troops landed near Bushehr. Iran surrendered within months. Herat was lost forever. Today it is in Afghanistan. The British wanted a buffer for India. Iran paid the price. By the 1870s, Iran was broke. The Shahs sold concessions to foreigners just to stay afloat. A British company got the right to build telegraph lines. A Russian company got the right to fish in the Caspian. A German company got mining rights. The country was being sold piece by piece. The worst came in 1891. The Shah gave a British company the monopoly on tobacco. All tobacco, from the farmer's field to the smoker's pipe. One company would control everything. The tobacco was grown by Iranian farmers, smoked by Iranian men, enjoyed by Iranian women in their kalyans, their water pipes. Now it all belonged to foreigners. The merchants of Tehran closed their bazaars. The clerics preached against the concession. A woman named Fatima, a merchant's wife, wrote a letter that spread through the city. If the Shah sells our tobacco to the British, we will teach our daughters to smoke British pipes with their hair uncovered. A threat against modesty, a threat against honor. It worked. The ulama, the religious scholars, gathered. The most respected of them, Mirza Hassan Shirazi, was in Samarra, far from Tehran's pressure. He issued a fatwa, a religious ruling. It was short. In the name of God, the merciful, the forgiving. Today, the use of tobacco is war against the Imam of the age. The Imam of the age is the hidden Imam, the messianic figure who will return at the end of time. To smoke tobacco was now to fight against the Messiah. The country stopped smoking. The Shah's wives stopped smoking. His servants stopped. His guards stopped. The Shah himself found his court filled with the smell of unlit pipes and the sight of men chewing gum desperately. The concession collapsed. The British left. For the first time, a non-Western people had used non-violent resistance to defeat a Western power. Gandhi studied this. So did the Irish. So did the Turks. The tobacco protest taught Iran something. That the people could move the Shah. That the bazaar and the mosque together were stronger than the army. That unity could defeat empire. In 1905, the lesson was applied again. The Shah was weak. The government was corrupt. The people demanded a constitution. They gathered in the British legation garden, thousands of them, seeking refuge, seeking change. The Shah gave in. In 1906, Iran became the first country in the Middle East with a constitution and an elected parliament. The Majlis was born. It lasted 2 years. The next Shah, with Russian support, bombarded the Majlis building. The constitution survived on paper, but not in practice. Iran slid back into autocracy. But the idea remained. The idea that the people had a voice. That the Shah was not absolute. That Iran could be different. In 1921, a military commander named Reza Khan marched on Tehran. He would crown himself Shah 4 years later. The Pahlavi dynasty had begun. The Qajars were finished. They left little behind, a few palaces, a lot of debts, a country that had learned how to resist. In Tehran today, you can visit the Golestan Palace. The Qajar Shahs built it. The paintings show them with long beards and tall hats, receiving European ambassadors, looking confident. They look like they were in control. They were not in control. The Russians and British were in control. The Qajars just held the door. But in the alleys of Tehran, in the bazaars, in the mosques, something was growing. A new idea, a Persian idea, that the people, not the Shah, not the foreigner, were the real power. The 20th century would test that idea to destruction. Part 10. The Last Revolution. The 20th century arrived in Iran with oil and guns. In 1908, British prospectors struck oil in Khuzestan. The Anglo-Persian Oil Company was born. Winston Churchill, then First Lord of the Admiralty, bought a controlling stake for the British government. The British Navy would run on Persian oil. Iran got 16% of the profits. Britain got the rest. For 40 years, Iran seethed. Reza Shah, the first Pahlavi, tried to modernize. He built railways, opened schools, forced men to wear Western clothes, forced women to remove the veil. He ruled with an iron fist and a simple philosophy. Make Iran look like Europe, and Europe will treat us as equals. It did not work. Europe treated Iran as a colony. When Reza Shah tried to stay neutral in World War II, Britain and Russia invaded. They occupied Iran. They sent the Shah into exile. They used Iranian railways to supply Stalin's armies, and they kept the oil flowing. In 1951, Iranians elected a prime minister who promised to change everything. His name was Mohammad Mossadegh. He was 69 years old. He cried easily. He fainted often. He wore pajamas to parliament. And he nationalized the oil industry. The British were furious. They called him a thief. They organized a boycott of Iranian oil. They plotted his overthrow. But Mossadegh was popular. When the Shah tried to fire him, millions poured into the streets. The Shah fled to Rome. Mossadegh was more powerful than ever. Then came August 19, 1953. The CIA and MI6 had been planning for months. They paid agents to pose as communists. They paid mobs to riot. They paid generals to switch sides. On that August morning, the coup began. Tanks rolled into Tehran. Mossadegh's house was shelled. He escaped through a garden wall, but surrendered the next day. He was put on trial, defended himself brilliantly, sentenced to 3 years in solitary confinement anyway, then house arrest for life. He died in 1967, still under guard, still unrepentant. The Shah returned. He never forgot who put him back on the throne. For the next 26 years, he ruled with American support and Savak, his secret police. They tortured, they killed, they filled prisons with anyone who disagreed. In 1963, a little-known cleric named Ruhollah Khomeini spoke out against the Shah's reforms. He was arrested, exiled. He ended up in Paris, far from Iran, but connected by cassette tape. His sermons were smuggled into Iran by the thousands. In bazaars, in mosques, in secret gatherings, people listened. By 1978, the Shah was dying of cancer. The country was boiling. Every 40 days, protesters marched. Every 40 days, soldiers shot. The deaths created more marches. The marches created more deaths. The spiral spun faster and faster. In January 1979, the Shah left. He took a plane and never came back. He died in Egypt the next year, a king without a country. On February 1st, 1979, Khomeini flew home. The plane landed at 9:27 in the morning. Millions lined the streets. They threw flowers. They cried. They reached toward his car, hoping just to touch it. Khomeini went to the cemetery, the Takht-e Zahra, the graves of those killed by the Shah. He spoke, his voice was hard. The Shah is gone, but the work is not finished. We must remove all traces of the monarchy. We must create an Islamic republic. Not one word more, not one word less. The revolution had many faces: communists, nationalists, liberals. Women who saw freedom in a scarf, women who saw prison in the same cloth. They had united against the Shah. Now they turned on each other. Khomeini's faction won. The Islamic Republic was born. The universities closed. The scarf became compulsory. The morality police appeared. Thousands were executed. Iran became what it is today, a paradox. The most democratic system in the Middle East with an elected parliament, and the most theocratic with a supreme leader above all. In 1980, Saddam Hussein invaded. The war lasted 8 years. 500,000 Iranians died. Boys with keys to paradise around their necks walked through minefields. Chemical weapons burned lungs. Trenches filled with bodies. It was the First World War fought with modern weapons. Iran survived. Alone. No one helped. America supported Saddam. Europe sold him chemicals. Russia sold him weapons. Iran stood by itself. The war ended in 1988. Khomeini died the next year. The revolution had won, but at what cost? In 2009, millions filled the streets again, green for the opposition, green for change. They protested a stolen election. They were beaten, killed, arrested. The regime survived. In 2017, again. In 2019, again. In 2022, after a young woman named Mahsa Amini died in morality police custody, again. Women took off their scarves. They burned them. They shouted, "Woman, life, freedom." The regime shot, arrested, executed. The cycle continues. In the bazaars of Tehran, you can buy everything. Chinese electronics, Turkish clothes, Persian rugs. The merchants talk quietly about politics. They remember Mossadegh. They remember Khomeini. They remember the war. They remember the protests. Iran is old. 7,000 years old. It has seen Assyrians and Medes, Greeks and Arabs, Mongols and Turks, British and Americans. It has been conquered a dozen times. It has outlived every conqueror. The question today is not whether Iran will survive. It will. The question is what Iran will become. A theocracy still fighting the last war. A democracy waiting to be born. Something new, something Persian, something that has not existed before. In the ruins of Persepolis, the columns still stand. In the fire temple of Yazd, the flame still burns. In the streets of Tehran, the women still walk, scarves loose, eyes defiant. 7,000 years of history, 7,000 years of survival. Iran waits, like it always has.